Chris Hayes did this great segment about the minimum wage. He's going to talk about the fake corporate-funded movement that tries to mask itself like it's an academic movement or an academic group that's doing these studies. And what they do is they argue against minimum wage increases, and they try to cloak it in academic terms as if, you know, it's high-minded, and they said, well, after we rigorously looked into it, you just can't raise the minimum wage. And then he's going to talk directly to one of the guys from these groups. The segment is a little long, and I still chopped it down, but it's well worth it. Let's listen.
Both at the state and federal level. New Jersey last week joined 20 other states and Washington in raising its minimum wage above the level set by Congress, which hasn't been changed since 2009. And there are campaigns to do the same in at least 5 other states. President Obama has thrown his support behind Senate Democrats' proposal to raise the minimum wage from its current level of $7.25 up to $10.10 per hour. A poll last week, meanwhile, found that more than 3/4 of Americans say they would vote to raise the minimum wage to $9 per hour, including 58% of Republicans. Now, anytime the minimum wage is in the news, there's a good chance you're going to come across this guy, Michael Saltzman, the research director for the very serious-sounding Employment Policies Institute, which has fought against a minimum wage hike. EPI bills itself as a nonprofit research organization dedicated to studying public policy issues surrounding employment growth. And that description is often taken at face value in the mainstream media, where you will find them quoted on this. The thing you need to know about EPI, which effectively presents itself as a think tank, is that it appears to be something else entirely. The group adopted a name very similar to an actual think tank, the Economic Policy Institute, which also has the acronym EPI. And as the Center for Media and Democracy has documented, the conservative EPI operates out of the same suite as a public relations firm owned by this guy, lobbyist Richard Berman. In fact, Berman is the principal officer of the Employment Policies Institute, one of what Bloomberg reported are 5 tax-exempt groups that operate out of Berman's office and have paid his firm more than $15 million. Berman was once identified by the nickname Dr. Evil in a 60 Minutes profile. He's worked to block food safety legislation, sought to prevent regulations on tobacco, lobbied for restaurant chains that do not want to see the minimum wage increased. And while the Employment Policies Institute and its sister organizations do not disclose their donors, it's safe to assume they're very likely funded by those very same interests. And joining me now is Michael Saltzman from behind the curtain, the Employment Policies Institute, a former researcher for Berman and Company, and David Sirota, syndicated newspaper columnist and contributor to Salon.com. All right, Michael, look, it's all in the game, as Omar on The Wire would say. You guys got a lobbying operation in Washington, D.C. You got clients. They don't want the minimum wage to be raised because they don't want to pay their workers more money. This is just the way Washington works. Why pretend there's some independent institute that's like churning out position papers? Why not just be clear about what you guys are up to?
We're not pretending anything. I mean, the Employment Policies Institute has been around for 20 years. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We have an advisory board that has a former CBO director, economist from Cornell University,
can do that.
economists from the University of Chicago. And here's the thing. The only reason this is a story,
how many economists do you have on staff?
The only reason this is a story...
How many economists do you have on staff?
The only reason this is a story is because people like Salon Magazine don't like our viewpoint. They don't like our viewpoint.
How many economists do you have on staff?
I am the research director at the Employment Policies Institute, and we work with economists.
Where did you get your PhD in economics?
I was an economist for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I studied economics at the University of Michigan.
As an undergraduate, but where did you get your PhD?
I don't call myself an economist because I don't have a PhD in economics.
I see.
And there's no secret that EPI is funded by businesses. We're completely upfront about that.
No, but here's the thing. Michael.
The big issue is that you don't like our point of view, and labor unions don't like our point of view. And so instead of engaging our facts, they just want to try and discredit us and say, well, you're funded by businesses.
Well, we can engage in facts. We can engage in facts.
Let's have that discussion. I'm up for it.
Since the Card and Kruger paper, we have seen a preponderance of evidence in the literature, which has become quite robust on the disemployment effects on the minimum wage.
Paper was debunked in the exact same journal that published it in the American Economic Review.
No, it was not debunked. The
preponderance
of the facts in the peer-reviewed literature, which does not emanate out of some office suite run by Rick Berman, shows that the disemployment effects that were anticipated by classical economists that you tend to cite have not materialized in discontinuity study after discontinuity study after discontinuity study.
He did a great job there, exposing this guy for what he is. He is a fake academic pretending to do studies, but all of his funding comes from the business community and multinational corporations and the rich. And when they give him the money and the funding, they know that this guy is supposed to get the outcome that they want. so that they have a fake intellectual leg to stand on where they go, well, we would love to raise the minimum wage and cut into our profits to look after our workers better, but we just can't do it because we have this study that tells us that it's a bad idea. So sorry. So it's absolute bullshit. Chris Hayes did a great job. You know, I even take it a step further. I don't even know if I would invite the guy on anyway, because all he's going to do is spew propaganda. If I was him, I might have done the first segment where you give all the facts and then just elaborate on that more, as opposed to bringing on the guy to lie on national TV. So there was one response that the guy had that I want to give a rebuttal to real quick. He tried to do a false equivalence when he was caught. So he said, well, sure, we get our funding from businesses, and we're not trying to hide that. Well, number one, yes, you are. But then he says, well, this studies you're citing, they're oftentimes funded by labor unions and people with a conflict of interest in that way. To which I respond, as Chris Hayes did, no, you're absolutely incorrect. The only way to determine if a study is actually good science and there's no, like, you know, conflict of interest party funding the study and skewing the results, the only way to know is if it is academic, number one, which the studies saying raise the minimum wage are academic, and number two, it needs to be peer reviewed. And if it's peer reviewed, if you meet those two criteria, so the studies we're talking about are done by economists, you know, those asshole experts that know a thing or two, and they're peer reviewed and they're academic. So our studies are true, the studies that say it's a good idea to raise the minimum wage, it'd be good for the economy, it'd be good for the worker. Their studies are false. It is bullshit propaganda bought by the rich and the powerful.